Today we're going to do equations and distributive property. So this is the page of our notes that we're going over. So some of the words that we need to know for this section are simplify, evaluate, solve, coefficient, and term. Now, simplify means that there is no equal sign in the equation. We are just going to combine everything that we can. All the parts that match, we're going to combine. Evaluate and solve are the same thing. If we have an equal sign in the equation and a variable like x, then we're going to not be done until we get to the end that it says x equals something. Now, coefficient means that if we have something like 3x plus 2y plus 7, the coefficients are the numbers in front of the letters. That is a coefficient. And terms are a set like this and like this. These are each different terms because they have a different part at the end. That and that and that are all different terms. So let's look and see how this works. How do we know if it's an equation and what we're supposed to do? If it has an equal sign and a variable, then our goal is to get the variable by itself. If it only has variables without an equal sign, we're just going to smash everything that matches together as much as possible. So, for example, down here, we have these two that have the same last name. We're going to put those two together. And over here, we're going to have something that has a variable and an equal sign. So this one we should be done when we have y equals. We're not going to simplify these. We're not going to solve this until a little bit later, but just so you know what we're looking for. So let's talk about combining like terms. We like to think of it as like a family reunion. So if you go to a family reunion, typically a lot of the people that are there have the same last name, and this is the same with numbers. So if we look at this, we're going to find everything that has the same last name. So this guy right here has a last name of X, and this guy right here has a last name of X. So we're going to take those guys and we're going to kind of put them together. Rather than moving them around, because you can't do that on your paper, we're just going to highlight them so they're the same. That guy and that guy have the same last name. If we look and see what else has the same last name, we have this guy here, 3y. Make sure you're keeping the sign that's in front of the number as well. And then if you notice, we have this guy right here. He has no last name, so he's just got like one name. He doesn't have anybody he can go together with in this situation. So let's look and see what we can combine. So the first thing we're going to combine is everything that has a last name of X. A positive 4 with the last name of X and a negative 7 with the last name of X. Positive 4 and negative 7 make negative 3. And their last name is still X. Let's look at the next one. We have 3 with the last name of Y and negative 12 with the last name of Y. If we use our same rules from Party Battle, we're going to take positive 3 and negative 12. Negative 12, negative wins this battle. And 12 minus 3 is 9. And the last name is still Y. So I like to kind of cross them off as I go to make sure that I've got everything taken care of as I go. The last one that we have is this like negative 2 that doesn't have anybody that goes with him. So negative 2 goes here at the end. So if we cannot look at this equation and see that there's anything extra that goes together, then we're done. Even though it has 3 parts, we have smashed everything together that we can that has the same last name. Now, sometimes in the next little bit, not this year, but we're going to work on some parts that are tricky parts. Tricky parts look like this. The difference on this, the last name has to match exactly in order to be combined. So just because it has an X, the exponent also has to match in order to combine things that are the same. We don't have to worry about this year. That's for next year. So let's try one. Pause the video here, and I want you to give this one a try, and let's compare your answer to my answer after you work this out. So let's see how this works out. I have a Y here and a Y here. I have X here and here and here. And then I have a plain number here. So if I put all of the Y's together, or all of the X's together, I'm going to get, I have a -2 and a +1 and a -7. So -2 plus 1 is 3. And 3 and -7 is going to be -4x. Cross these off because I know I took care of them. The next one is going to be the Y's. I have a +Y and a -5. So remember there's an invisible 1 here. So we have a 1 minus 5. 5 is the bigger number. Negative wins. And negative wins by 4, and the last name is still Y. Since there's nothing else here that goes with the -4, -4 is just going to go here at the end. This whole entire thing is your answer because none of these have the same last name and can be combined together. So that is where we end. Let's talk a little bit about distributive. Distributive property that we learned about last year can do a couple of things. If we look over here, sometimes we can use distributive property to pass out, which means the 2 goes to each of these parts. And then we can multiply down. Sometimes we can use distributive to factor out. What do both of these have that we can take away from them? That's going to be an X. If we take an X away from each of them, we can rewrite it like this. I like this one the best. This one I use to solve mentally a lot. So I know that 99 on this one is really close to 100. And 100 is 100, or 99 is 100 minus 1. So if I'm going to do a problem like this, I'm going to do 13 times 100, which is 1300, minus 13 times 1 is 13, and then I can solve it from there. Those are some of the ways that we can use distributive property, but let's talk a little bit more about distributive property. How do you know when you're going to use distributive property? I like to think of it as share the love. Share the love means if you have a number that's kissing the parenthesis, you're going to take that number and give it to every part that is in the parenthesis. So this 3 is going to go to this, then this, and we're going to multiply down. This 4 is going to go to this part, and we're going to multiply down. So let's see what we have on this one. This one will give us 3y minus 12. We're going to check for anything that can go together. These have the different last names, so we are done. Let's look at the next one. 4 times x is 4x, and 4 times -2 is -8. And then we're just going to drop this straight down, -10. Is there anything that has the same last name here? Well, there is. We have a -8 and a -10, which makes -18 because they're same signs, and 4x can just go in front. And now we're done. Now let's talk a little bit about rainbow and Santa hat. One of the reasons why we don't like to do rainbow Santa hat is this. So what I mean by rainbow or Santa hat is doing this, or taking this and going like this. So when we do Santa hat, which you can see like that looks like a Santa hat right there. What happens is when we do that, we end up hitting the first number, but we a lot of times forget to multiply that negative to the second number. So I like to take my number and I like to write it above each of my parts. I like to take my number, that's an invisible 1, and write it above each of my parts. So be careful with rainbow and Santa hat. We're not going to solve these, but I just wanted to show you what some of the tricky parts were. All right, so let's talk a little bit about equations now. Equations from last year, we talked about how to solve an equation. We know from our first section that that turns into a plus. And how we're going to solve this is we're going to get the x by itself, which means that plus 3 needs to go to the other side and be the opposite of plus 3, which is minus 3. So on this one, negative 13 and negative 3 equals, they're on the same team, so they're add them together, negative 16. Pause the video, try the next two answers, and let's see how you do. Here are the answers for the next two videos. We have two parts that need to move. We're going to move the negative 2 first. Rewrite it. And the last step, divide by negative 3, or divide by 3. So x on this one equals negative 3. Okay, let's talk about tricky parts. The tricky parts on this one is when you end with a negative y, you can never end with a negative variable. You're going to have to change the signs of everything when you're done at the end. And I'll show you how to do that in a little bit. The tricky parts on this one are that negative either needs to belong to the top or the bottom. It doesn't matter what you assign it to, but you need to pick which one it goes to. And the tricky parts of this one are both of these numbers you should really turn into a mixed number. And by that I mean 2 times 2 and then add the top number. So this should be 5 over 2 c equals 8 times 1 plus 7, 15 over 8. In order to solve that, that's what you're going to need to do. Here's some more tricky parts. This one has the same thing, a negative in front of the y. This one, remember we talked about that the tricky part is that anything that's in a fraction needs parentheses around the top. It keeps those parts together. So let's try a few. Now, one of the things you need to remember are a couple equation rules. We have those written right here. When you have solving an equal with an equation with an equal sign in it, you're going to go the opposite of order of operations. So you're going to actually start at add and subtract and work backwards. Or you can do this. Draw your line down the equal sign. Do any share the love and family reunion. And then we're going to move the number that's not connected to the variable and then rewrite it. And then we're going to move the number that is connected to the variable and rewrite it. Now, if you're not sure what that means, watch. We're going to do this. Let's try this one. This one is connected to the variable. It's being held kind of captive. So I'm going to take this positive 3 and I'm going to move it to the other side because it's the one that is not touching the letter. In order to get to the other side, over here with his buddy to freedom, he's going to go from positive 3 to negative 3. Now I'm going to simplify. Negative 2, negative 3 is negative 5. And now we have k divided by 3. We have one step left, and that is we need to get rid of this 3. Right now the 3 is dividing. It needs to move over and do the opposite of divide, which is multiply. Negative 5 times 3 is negative 15. And that should be our answer. Negative 15 equals k. Let's try another. Let's try this one. This one is from your homework. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look for anything. The first thing I'm going to do is look for anything that can be added together or distributed. On this problem right here, we know that these two have the same last name, so we can put them together. Let's do that. It's going to be 1, and these are both negative, so that's going to be negative 10k equals 1. From there, we're going to move the one that's not touching the letter. That is the positive 1. The opposite of positive 1 is negative 1. That's going to give us 0 equals negative 10k. And the last step that we need to do is divide. 0 divided by negative 10 is going to give us 0. So 0 equals k. So that's the reminder of how to solve equations. Here's some steps to help you. First step, do any distributive and family reunion. Second step, move the x's if you need to. We haven't done any of that yet. That will happen next unit. Next, move the number that's not connected to the variable and then rewrite it. And the last step, move the number that is connected to the variable and rewrite it. That should give you your final answer. So before you get started on homework, I want you to try this problem. If you get this problem right, then you're ready to go. Hit pause, solve the problem, and then see if your answer matches mine. Here's how this problem should be solved. Draw the line. This has parentheses. Opposite of divide is multiply. Negative 10 equals x plus 3. The opposite of plus 3 is minus 3. This one should be negative 13 equals x. This one is from your homework. Let's try it as well. I can see that these two things are going to have to go together before I do anything. That's going to be positive 3. I'm going to rewrite it. Now, my next step is going to be that I'm going to move the number that's not connected. This 3 is going to go over to the other side and go minus 3. So right here, I'm left with negative 18 equals 3r. The last step I'm going to do is divide by 3. My final answer is r equals, it's negative because there's only one negative, and 6. If you got both of those right, or at least if you understand what you got wrong and can fix it, then go ahead and get started with today's homework.